So fantastic to see you both and to watch the video, and great that we're specifically looking at his way of going and transitions. So the transitions are absolutely fantastic for strengthening him behind. So the more that you can do and the more frequently you can do them, the better. It's really beneficial strengthening work. So great to see the quality of the walk is there, and it's really nice to see these walk breaks throughout your schooling sessions so that he just gets a bit of a chance to get his breath back and relax. But obviously it's not for you to clock off, and you've got to really imagine that a dressage judge is watching your transitions into walk, your walk work and your transitions out of walk. So lovely clear 4-time rhythm with good overtrack, good length of neck. And you want to picture him walking like a big cat, like a jaguar. So he really moves through his whole body. Anytime when you're schooling, when you ride away from the track, so you make a turn onto a diagonal line or a turn round a corner or onto a circle, think about your outside aids pushing him around that turn, so that you'll know if you've used too much inside rein rather than using your outside leg, because he'll just give you too much neck bend, or you'll just find that your right hand will start to sort of drop down and maybe even pull back. So looking to really explain what's about to happen to him through your upper body, so keeping your hips nice and square to his hips, but turning your shoulders and head to look to exactly where you want to go to. The transitions into and out of trot are really beneficial for him. It's great as well because he doesn't have time to switch off, so he's got to stay with you mentally, and he's got to be active from the hind leg to push off up into that trot. The trot that you want, make sure there's no compromise on that. So there's no halfway house. If you want a working trot, from step 1, he has to give you a working trot. Now, a really nice exercise that you can also add into your schooling if you wanted to is to use trotting poles. So you could lay down a series of, say, 5 poles. You want to put them at a distance that's comfortable for him and his length of stride when he's in working trot. And what you can then do is walk towards them, and just before the first pole, then push him up into trot. So that first step really makes him lift his little legs, his little feet up and over the poles, gives you the cadence, gives you the consistency of the stride length, and makes him realise that that upward transition, he immediately has to go into that powerful working trot. Plus it's a little bit of fun and variety for him stepping over those coloured poles. If there are times in the downward transitions where you feel that he loses balance, or he looks to your hand to lean onto your hand for balance, then you can just ride forward out of that downward transition. So just feel like I've changed my mind, close the leg on, we're going to go up into trot and re-establish the balance, and then ride that downward transition again. If you feel him seeking your hand, you can just push your hand further forwards, just so that you feel that you're pushing that bit a little bit forwards in his mouth, and it's never there for him to use as a crutch or support in that downward transition. He's not going to fall over, so he then has to learn that he has to put his balance back onto his own hind leg and carry himself and support himself in that downward transition by stepping under more with the hind leg rather than toppling over, because your hand isn't going to be there to save him. So the same thing in the canter work. If you want working canter, the moment he jumps up into canter from your leg, he must give you working canter. And you can probably afford with him to be thinking yourself of a slightly quicker tempo, just to keep him nice and sharp and jumping in that canter. For the times when you're doing a bit of on and back in the canter, the actual back in the canter is good in your video because you don't want it to last for long. A couple of strides. If he struggles with it, it's much better to do far less of it, but a little bit more frequently, than to ask him to try and stay back on his hind leg when he just hasn't got the strength at the moment. So that's great to see. And it's now in your schooling work that you can really work on the straightness in the canter. So as he canters down the long side, as with any horse, very, very common that you see the quarters in. So now you've got to really work on that straightness of the canter so that if you were cantering head on towards a mirror, you wouldn't be able to see his hind legs because his front legs would be in the way because he's dead straight. So he's neither quarters in, quarters out, nor quarters swinging. So we need to get him working in a shoulder 4 positioning, because what we have to do is we have to get the shoulders in front of the hindquarters. So it's no good pushing the hindquarters around. We have to get the shoulders in front of the hindquarters to make the horse straight. So once he understands the shoulder 4 positioning and he's confident and comfortable in it, in the walk and the trot, which shouldn't take too long at all, you then want to do loads of it in your canter work. So to ride shoulder 4, let's imagine you're coming out of the short end of the school and you're about to go up the long side, imagining that as you come out that short end of the school, round that corner, that you're going to ride across the long diagonal from that quarter marker. So you would think about keeping your hips square, but turning your head and shoulders to look across to that diagonal line that you imagine yourself that you might want to ride onto. As you turn your head and shoulders, if your elbows are down by your side and your hands nice and close together and carried up and out in front of you, as you turn your head and shoulders, it will also help to turn his outside shoulder with that outside rein, and you'll start to feel his outside shoulder or his shoulders come off the track and slightly start to come onto an inner track. The moment you feel that, you want to think inside leg to outside rein, your weight down the outside stirrup, and then to keep your shoulders mirroring his shoulders, so your shoulders still stay turned, your hips stay straight, and you then turn your head to look up the track to where you want to go to. So that's your shoulder 4 positioning. Once he's confident with those aids and he's happy doing that lots in canter, being able to bring those shoulders slightly onto an inner track with a shoulder 4 or shoulder in feel positioning, he'll then be able to be straight in the canter. It is important in that shoulder 4 or shoulder in positioning that you do think about your weight being down your outside stirrup, because this really comes into play a little bit later on when you're teaching him half pass. Because in half pass, you'll actually have your weight down your inside leg, and that will help him to move across in his half pass. Whereas in your shoulder 4 or your shoulder in, you've got your weight down that outside leg. So you're teaching him from very early on to listen to and understand the weight aids as well. And that's really going to assist you later on in his schooling work as you ask for more demanding movements. The circle work that you're doing is great and really good for getting him to step under himself as he has to turn onto the circle. You can start to decrease the size of your circles so that it does become a little bit more demanding for him. He does just have to step under that little bit more. And you can really make sure that as a rider, you really turn and look with your head and shoulders to exactly where you want to ride to on that circle. And the smaller the circle gets, especially if you're doing them in canter, the more he's going to push you to the outside. That's just simple centrifugal force that happens to everybody. So you just have to be very conscious that as you're cantering on the smaller circles or on any corner or turn, that you are stepping onto your inside stirrup and stepping over to the inside to counteract the fact that he's going to be pushing you to the outside. As you're riding all of your schooling movements, just keep going through the checklist in your head of your position so that you're just paying attention to yourself very frequently with regards to your position. And keep thinking about those hands coming up and forward, and you can picture trying to push your little fingers closer together to help keep them in place. You can start to be a little bit more demanding in terms of the frequency of the transitions, and also looking at doing your halt to trots and walk to canters. Again, really helping to strengthen that hind leg. So fantastic work, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the future and seeing the progress.